Welcome to the Physics of Shop Safety with Technical Advisor Timothy Sykes, his teacher, Technical Advisor, years of experience. My name's Richard Close. This is a preliminary video for you to watch before you go into the shop to give you a transitional time to think about what you're about to do. Before you've had physics classes, math classes, all these formulas and forces fit nicely on a piece of paper, a calculator, a spreadsheet. You can delete them, erase them, you can reboot things, but you can't when you get into material science. Here, all of that becomes real. And the very digital world you've been dealing with is now dealing with a very analog world. And this deals with the world of shop safety. And this is not a do's or don't class. This is how to deal and handle the materials you're going to be given. Let's talk about managing powerful forces and take a look at an example.
Okay, in shop physics and power, I can use a saw pretty simple, but pretty rough. Alright, I have leverage, velocity, teeth, angles, simple things of physics. When I throw power, all of these things accelerate. Here I'm controlling the saw. With power, I have to control the power.
All right, hold on. Let's go back. Did you hear the blade? The sound will change. If I roll this back a little bit, you will hear that it actually jammed. One of the things I did in this film, I anticipate kickback of a skill saw's power. So as I pulled it off, I should never pull off with the blade still spinning. This is a dangerous thing to do. Also, I pulled it off as an angle. See the gap right here? The blade grabbed and the saw flew off into my hand. I was prepared for that, and it only flew back maybe about 6 inches, but you can watch it fly back. The next thing I want you to take a look as I put the saw down and for it to spin, that this ain't no video game. You have to control these forces, and this is what this session is about. What are these forces exactly? Well, let's take a look. In a power drill, I have the movement of the machine. Most of the tools in the shop all deal with the motor. We're taking electricity, moving it through magnets, and making it spin with torque. That reacts to the wood, and the wood will move in a certain direction. And as we move from one machine to another, you must adapt for the different ways wood moves. And next, the machine has forces. Now in a hand tool, like you just saw me with the skill saw, the hand tool, I must control the movement of the machine. In more powerful tools, they're bolted to floors for a reason. Let's take a look what happens when we don't master opposing forces. All right, and we did tell you you're not supposed to drill into the wood benches, right? But you can see the sloppiness of it. Now we'll watch Mr. Sykes do it right. What I want you to do is take a look at the control of the angle of attack, and we'll review this in a second. First, he set the line for the screw to go into with a drill, holding it right at the right angle, keeping it steady. Now the pulsing was for a reason. Each time he pulses it, he gives himself, as a human, a chance to adjust the angle as it's going in and reseat the screw head into the head of the screw. And now we'll go into what you'll typically experience in the shop. Starting with the joiner, you'll select a piece of wood that is very rough. All the edges are rough, and you must square them off and flatten them out. Let's take a look at the physics of each one of these pieces. The jointer squares off flat planes. This will give me one side that's flat and another, a perfectly good right angle. To do this, I have a blade that's spinning around, two blades on a rolling piece that spins around and strikes the wood as the wood moves at a perfectly flat way along the table. You'll see this again and again. This is the table and this is a fence, which holds it at a right angle in this case. Now, as the blade is striking the wood, the forces of the blade push the wood up and will also push it backwards. Your job is to push it through a wood path, is to push it across the table and the fence, keeping it perfectly straight with more force than the machine is exerting on the board. Let's take a look and see how that works. Again, let's take a look at that one more time. Remember I said the forces here? Let's take a look at that. Well, wait a minute. Let's take a look at the laws of physics first on this. Looks like math class, don't it? Well, the angle of attack is 45 degrees, pressing it down to the corner between the table and the fence. And then I have to move it forward at the same time, another 45 degrees towards the fence and moving it forward. And it must be smooth and consistent. Let's see how we handle that in the next. So let's see how it's done. Again, remember the angle of attack here? Look at this device that holds the wood board down. Now take a look at this stand. His body weight also maintains the 45-degree angle. So standing in a proper position where you're in control at all times is a key part of the physics of safe shop behavior. Now, without a doubt, in the shop, the most intimidating tool is the table saw. The table saw is the most intimidating tool for a reason. Remember before I had the skill saw in my hand, and when I jammed it, it flew back at me, but I had enough power in my own hand to control that process. This is a much bigger blade, much deeper teeth, and a much more powerful motor behind it. And the other thing, the blade is facing you. So what we have to do is be very careful with the laws of physics on this one. This is what's going on. The blade is circulating up, pushing the board up. And it is pushing backwards. Remember the jointer? Very similar. So what we need to do is keep the board down. Before the skill saw, which has weight to it, comes up in my hand, here what we're at risk is the board binding and coming back out at us. So you need to guide the wood and do a stronger force, very secure and confident in a smooth way against the blade. Let's take a look at how to do it right. See how smooth that was? Let's go through the physics. Just like we saw on the jointer, I have to apply pressure on the table and up against the guide, 45-degree angle. And at the same time, I need to move it forward. Here's our blade. I have to move it forward with pressure against it at the same time as the guide. So that's the basic principle of it. So our key thing is to learn how do we hold our hands to do that. Now that you know the physics, take a look at the video another time and see what it makes sense. And keep in mind of what the guide is for. In narrow cuts, you'll see this guide has a place for my fingers to go. Notice my thumb is pushing the board in and my fingers above that are holding it down. Protection, control, measurement, and precise cuts are the reason for the guides. If I do not do this, what will happen is it can kick back a board. The table saw is so powerful it can take a 2x4 and throw it through a concrete wall or a cinder block wall. This is what happens when it binds. Whoever was working with this, you can see their angle isn't exactly parallel going up the part of the board. Notice how this part's skinnier than this? So they weren't feeding it right to begin with. the blade grabbed it and shot in a curved angle, and this board, I would assume, flew off the table. Do not stand behind these boards when you're cutting them. And that is part of the kickback process. Guides are on all systems. Now, on a table saw, you'll also see this. This part here is to suck up dust. If I have bits of, the other reason why we wear goggles, but if I'm using a saw like this and I get sawdust in my eye and I flinch, it's not a very safe thing to do. So this will take up that. The other thing about this, if the board lifts up, it will strike this. You adjust these for your board, so it's just a little bit over the top of your board when you're cutting. Notice how the guide is down? It's a little bit higher than the board as it passes through. Notice the hands at this time. Remember the physics? This hand is guiding the board. It is not moving forward. It also is staying away from this yellow zone. Don't put your fingers near the yellow zone. The thumb pushes, the fingers pushes down. So you are handling all of the opposing forces against the table saw. And you notice how he's standing a little bit over here to the left, so the board would go behind him if it did jam. Simple, get it through and out of the way. Don't worry about the board that cuts out on this side. It will sit on the table no matter what. It will not fly. This side is the path that will bind it and fly. Let's take a look at our next saw called the miter saw. This is an interesting saw. Again, we have a table and a fence principle, but I can do it at angles. So I can cut at angles for any particular board. It gives a very, very sharp, crisp edge. This is spinning at around 6,500 RPM, and these in carbon tip teeth at the end of the blade. It's extremely sharp, powerful, yet a very safe tool to use. Let's look at these forces. Our first force on this is the spinning of the blade, obviously. Now watch, we're dealing with the opposite of the table saw. Now the blade is pushing the board down on the table. That's nice news. And it pushes the board away from you against the fence. That's nice news. So it's a very clean cut. All you have to do is keep the board stable in this case. And the Wood's behavior is to press down to the corner. Let's see how a master handles this. Remember that rough board that we had in the beginning? This is that same piece of red oak. See the kickback? Notice the blade is stopped before he pulls it back. Not the way that we saw the skill saw used in the beginning. Alright, now that we had a finished board, let's drill a hole. Now a power drill moves slower. However, it deals with a lot of pressure, big belts, big motor, can drill big holes. How does this work? In this case, the spinning of the machine takes the wood with the machine, as opposed to kicking the wood back. So you're in a shop, people are around you, you must pay attention at all times. If you look up for a conversation and you stop the control of the wood, now this board had a lot of friction and pressure going down to it, but if a drill grabbed it, it would slam against the post, breaking the wood. So you must control, you must focus, and listen very carefully. In each one of the cases, the skill and any of these drills and sanders, what you hear will tell you how fast you're cutting, how much pressure will be done. These are things to be listened to. Now in this case, we're going to complete the job the right way. I'll talk through it again, but I want you to listen at the very end of the clip. Listen to how the wood changes, the sound of the drill changes as it breaks through. Takes his time to set it up. See how he takes his time, sets it up. He feels the wood and the drill against it. Wide drills like this combine. Look at the hand on the table, resting it, giving it even a firmer grip. Hear the last break, and it's smooth. You know you're done. I won't go into all the details of the other tools, but some of the forces of the ones that you'll use a lot. Belt sander's forces are directly down. So what you're going to do is you're going to keep it firmly on the table and then rotate the plank to however you need to sand. On the other hand, a disc sander used for similar things is working differently. The disc sander's rotational thing makes it so you must save on the on the downward motion of the disc. If I took this board and put it over the left side, which I didn't want to demonstrate, it will chatter bang up and down on the table, and the machine, if it grabs it, will simply take it and slam it over to where it wants to be comfortable with, the right side. Also, look at your physics. The disc is moving faster out on the edge than it is towards the middle, so that will change the grinding action. So if I wanted to do this as a curved N, it gives me a lot of control and options. So even though this is fixed, you're the thing that's going to be moving it back and forth. You're the forces that will control how this wood is shaved. Also note this plank of wood has a big knot in it. All of these areas, this grain versus this grain where a knot, all of them will sand cut differently, and you have to compensate for that while you're in the shop. There's an old phrase that says you can't learn how to ride a bicycle over a book, from a book. And you can't. You learn over time. How does the bike feel when it's going over sandy surface, a wet surface, leaves, even if you're crazy, snow. In all those cases, you learn how to compensate with your body. The wood path, you control it. Again, flat on the table. So how do we manage these forces? Well, safety gears for one. If I get dust or anything flies into my eyes, I won't be able to see where my hand's on that. A simple flinch could have dire results. Defensive posture. Make sure your footing is firm and that you're comfortable where you are. You don't want to stand still while you're moving a board across a planer and a saw because you're leaning down on top of the blade. Scary idea. A firm grip. Don't let go. Be confident in what you're doing. All these things you'll learn in time. A balanced stand, wood guide placement. Make sure your guides are locked down, tight, and properly adjusted. Don't let your hand be doing something that a wood guide will be doing. Confident movement. Move confidently, smoothly with all the equipment. Pay attention to the changes. Listen with your ears. You can hear when a saw is binding or struggling through a piece of wood, and you can control that by the pressure you put on it. Wood has lots of variables. Remember in the beginning we talked about physics are nice on a blackboard and a calculator, but reality is not so kind. You have to look out for cracks, hardness, knots, variances of density, weak points, machine variances. If I'm ripping through sideways and I may not have a crack, but it's weak in a board, it can crack back and I have to cut the whole board again. I want to look for knots. When blades run through this, it can bind and it can do all sorts of things. Other shades of wood, this might be more dense. A blade can slow down in it. All of these things are to be considered as you move with a piece of wood. This is why it really is an art form. The most complex tool in the whole shop, perhaps the most dangerous, is you. The hand can do a variety of things, so the hand controls it. Let's see what it does. Hand clamps, it twists obviously. It can be proactive and it can learn. It can learn. If I'm using a particular piece of wood, I will learn. This is dry, this is moist, this will bind, this will go smoothly. It has automatic defense system. If you clip a hand, it'll be automatic for you to pull back, which means if I'm on a table saw and I clip a finger or I nick something, I'll go, ouch, I'll pull back. At that moment, that board is completely out of control. It is omnidirectional. Remember the disc sander. I can do curve sanding with that, twist it, angles, all sorts of different things, because my hand is so flexible in a way that it can do pressures and angles with these particular tools. It would be way too expensive to make the tool itself do that, although robotics does some of that. It is also heat and pressure sensitive. If a blade is dull or I'm doing too much pressure, it will smoke. I can smell smoke, I can feel pressure, how things are vibrating, all of these things through the hand. It's an amazing tool. And also, it can be variable. I can react to all these things and control it any way I want to. And it is self-healing and self-correcting. You learn by using. And all of this is networked to advanced processors. Well, I understand this is a high school course, maybe not so advanced. The key thing is you cannot horse around in the shop. The second any of those signals going to this hand are disrupted, you're at risk, and so is your project. So with that, I would like to send my sincere thanks for Timothy Sykes and his technical advisory capacity and showing us how to handle these tools the right way. Keep in mind of the forces you have and control them. Again, you will have wonderful projects, and it's a great art and craft to learn. Now you're ready for the shop.